What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we finish up our talks on the Genie Warlock, one of my favorites and one of the very few that is getting a 10 out of 10 ranking. Of course, if you missed that video, that is up in the iCard above, but we are going to today be building one, and I am very much looking forward to that. Make sure to leave a like on the video though, and subscribe if you haven't already. Also make sure to click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded, and share the video with your friends. Another great way to support the channel is by becoming a member down below. For just $2 a month, you get access to all of my build guides, which is a great resource, as well as write-ups for all of my subclass fixes that I've done along the way. There are a ton of those there for you, and like I said, that is available at the lowest tier, and at higher tiers there are some other things available as well. Of course, we have things like early videos, 24 hours early, those come out. We also have some other nice perks that are there at the gold level, and that is developing as well. So make sure to check all of that out. But to all of you, thank you so much for being here. So this week, I'm going to be fulfilling a specific archetype of Warlock, and I talked about this back earlier this week on Wednesday, and I think that I think you all will like it. If you saw Wednesday's video already, or you paused when the iCard went by a little earlier and then came back now, then you would understand that we are going to be trying out building a cheese grater. Now, if you don't know what a cheese grater build is, it is essentially a build that sets down some sort of trap or some sort of spell or something, and then basically you force enemy creatures to move over top of said hazard, right? So a lot of times it's a spike growth, but there are other options that do this as well. And so you find ways to force movement, and it makes them take damage as they are moved around within some kind of a space, whatever it happens to be. We've done this with Cloud of Daggers before, and so that's another way, but that's a lot less. That's a lot less cheese grater and more just knock you into a bunch of knives, right? It's not nearly the same thing. This is a true cheese grater type of thing, and so I just wanted to get out of the way. This is not an original idea that I came up with. This is just my take on that archetype, and to me the Genie is the absolute best way to build that archetype, and so that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's go ahead and do it. Before we jump in, of course, here are the rules for this series. Make sure to check those out real quick, and then we are going to jump in with our race. I am again committing the cardinal sin. I was really good for like several classes, honestly, in this series. I didn't take this race at all, and then here I am. I've taken it 2 or 3 times, I think, in just the Warlock series, but we're going custom lineage. I know people don't like custom lineage. I know it is what it is, but getting a feat right off the bat is very important for Cheese Grater to be able to do what it does. We're gonna have to delay things ultimately if we can't take this right off the bat, so I need this. So we're doing that. We get a feat right off the bat, and we're taking Crusher. Crusher is absolutely essential here. Now, you might be thinking, well, I can already move people around with other things I'm going to be getting as a Warlock. Why worry about Crusher? Think about this. That's an extra 5 feet of movement every time that you hit, right? To me, that means that's extra damage every single turn. It's not just a one-time thing. That is doing a lot of extra damage over time when you think about that. And to me, those damage numbers matter. And for a free feat that I can get at level 1, it's absolutely worth it to me to have that on board. For our stats, of course, we're going to be using the standard array that we always use, but of course, if your stats look different than mine, then you may need to adjust accordingly. For our top stat, we're going to go with Charisma. Second highest is going to go into Constitution. Third highest in Dexterity. Beyond that, it really doesn't matter. I typically go with Wisdom next, just because Wisdom saving throws are a thing that come up a decent amount, and Strength and Intelligence, they really don't matter. We're gonna get a +2 to 1 stat with our custom lineage, and we're going to throw that into Charisma, and we're going to get a +1 to either Strength or Constitution with Crusher, and of course we're going with Constitution. So that is what our stats will look like there. For equipment, there's really not a whole lot that I want. We're not starting Warlock, again breaking more rules here, but I'm not really looking for much armor. I'm not looking for much of anything, honestly. So make sure you have like an arcane focus. that's about it. That's really all you need. Besides that, we really don't need much, because at level 1 we are starting off not with Warlock but with Sorcerer. Sorcerer makes a lot of sense if we're making a blaster, right? This is a blaster that is a little more strategic than just the mindless throwing out spells, right? This is a very powerful way of doing this, but Sorcerer kind of unlocks even further potential. The main reason why I wanted to start with this is, of course, the Constitution saving throw proficiencies, and I didn't want to go fighter on this build. There are 0 fighter levels, so don't worry. We're doing Sorcerer instead. I think that this is honestly the best way to start us out, and that's despite us having no armor proficiency, but we'll work on that as we go. For features, of course, we get spellcasting right off, which we'll come back to, and then we get our subclass right off the bat, same thing as Warlock. I've seen a few builds online that go a few different directions. I chose not to go the most common direction that I've seen, and instead we are going to be going with Clockwork Soul. I think Clockwork Soul is incredibly good. Of course, we've covered it on the channel before. I'll put that up in the iCard above for you to check out. But Restore Balance and Clockwork Magic are both great. Clockwork Magic, of course, gives us access to extra spells that do not count against us, which is absolutely fantastic. Are they the best on this build? Maybe not, but still, there's a lot of really good stuff here that we can grab for sure. For cantrips, honestly, right now, I just need something like Firebolt to get me to next level when I get Eldritch Blast. So just grab something that deals a little bit of damage. We're just in survival mode at this point. For first level spells, grab Mage Armor, right? That's the biggest thing that I need at this point. So we're just trying to survive. We just need to get through level 1. And then at level 2, we become a Warlock, right? That's where we're at, right? So don't really worry too much about level 1. You're going to be super frail. You're not going to have a great time, but it's fine, because once we get to Warlock 1 at level 2, we get to go ahead and activate all of our Genie stuff. So we get our Genie's Vessel, and of course we get Pact Magic. So we get to choose which Genie we want to serve, right? And there's only one choice that makes sense to me here, and that is the Tao, right? I talked back on Wednesday about how I felt that the spell list for the Tao is actually the worst spell list of any of them, and I still stand by that statement. I think just purely as a spell list, that list is the worst of all of them. However, when it comes to what features the Tao gets later and their interactions with everything, that's where this becomes very, very powerful. So yeah, as a spell list, it's not great, but everything else related to Tao is very good, right? We, of course, are going to get a resistance to bludgeoning damage. That's one of the big 3, right? That's one of the big 3 that represent like 90% of the damage that you're going to be taking. So that's a big deal right there. And of course, it combos well with all of the other things that we're going to be doing going forward, which is great. So yeah, we're going with the Tao Genie, which represents bludgeoning damage, which is fantastic. We're going to be getting our Genie's Vessel at this point as well. So of course we can go inside of it if we need to, chill out, have a party of just one for now. We'll be able to have some friends over later. But yeah, it's a really, really cool feature. Again, we went into a lot of detail earlier this week, so if you missed that, make sure to check it out. But yeah, for cantrips, Eldritch Blast is an absolute must. This build does not work without Eldritch Blast. You might as well kiss it goodbye if you don't want to take that. Lightning Lure is another option if you want to go with that. That's another pull option, although once we have everything set up, I don't know that you'll ever cast it again. So yeah, because Eldritch Blast is just going to do things a little bit better. For first level spells, really the only standout is Hex. There's not a whole lot else that I'm super into, so besides that, pick your favorites. But I think Hex is really the most important one, and besides that, it is what it is. At Warlock 2, we're going to get our Eldritch Invocations, and Agonizing Blast, of course, is a gimme. I think I've taken that every single time, but I mean, that's free damage. Every single time we hit, that's free damage, right? And every time that we gain new beams, once we get to certain levels, then that just makes it that much better, right? So I can't go without that. However, we are also taking one that I have not taken up till now, and that is Repelling Blast. Repelling Blast is great because that allows us to push people away from us by 10 feet whenever we hit them with our Eldritch Blast, which is great. So now, once we get everything set up, which will still be a few more levels, but once we get everything set up, we can begin pushing people with that. And that is not a once per turn type of thing. There are plenty of other types of things in here as far as invocations that allow movement, but it's only once per turn. And of course, when we have all these beams, we want to be able to do things multiple times per turn. Well, Repelling Blast allows us to do that, which is pretty fantastic. I love that. Warlock 3, we will go ahead and grab our Pact Boon. When in doubt, go Pact the Chain, and that's exactly what we're going to do now. So we will, of course, get advantage on our one beam for now. Once we get more and more beams, it's still just the first beam that gets the advantage if we use our familiar to do the help action. And here's the thing. We can go with an imp, and the imp is very important because it can go invisible. That means that it can take the help action and stay invisible. It doesn't even have to disengage like what the owl does with flyby, right? It can stay invisible, take that help action, stay in melee, and it's always got disadvantage into it because it can't see it, right? It isn't making an attack, and it is not casting a spell, therefore it can maintain its invisibility, which is really, really helpful. We also get second level spells here, and again, there is a huge one that we have to take. That is Spike Growth. Again, just as a spell, Spike Growth isn't the best thing out there. It's nice for crowd control sometimes, right? If you can bottleneck people. But we're gonna make it busted this time around. We're gonna make this an amazing spell because with Cheese Grater, it is the premier spell. For other options, Misty Step and Mirror Image. Misty Step, of course, is great for teleportation, and then Mirror Image is nice as a defensive feature, sort of. Although I think Spike Growth is going to be our primary method pretty much all the time, right? And so at this point, we probably aren't using Hex anymore. We're pretty much exclusively using Spike Growth. So yeah, it is what it is. So next we get to level 5, and not only does our Eldritch Blast go up, but I'm going to go back to Sorcerer. And the reason we're doing this is because I want to go ahead and get something else online first. If you want to continue in Warlock, by all means, go for it. But I want to get something else online first. I needed to get Spike Growth before I could go any further. But yeah, for now, we're going to be doing this. So we're going to get at Sorcerer 2, Font of Magic. Font of Magic, of course, just allows us to convert spell slots to sorcery points and vice versa. Not a whole lot we can do with that yet until we get to Sorcerer 3. That's where we get Meta Magic, and we, of course, get to pick 2 options here. I would go with either Quickened Spell or Seeking/Subtle Spell. I'm not really super sold on which one I want to go with, and of course, we're going to get more later, so I don't really care, right? It's really up to you on what you want to do on that. Of course, if you have not seen my video on general sorcerer stuff, I went into depth on all of the sorcerer things, including meta magics, in that video, which will be up in the iCard above for you right there. For second level sorcerer spells, I don't really have a ton that I'm really all that excited about. We're going to be casting Spike Growth, right? And this just gives us other spell slots that we can cast it with. That's it, right? That's really all I care about. Then the next 2 levels can really be done in either order. It doesn't matter because we're going to be taking level 4 of each of the classes that we are in so far. So it doesn't matter which order you put them in. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going Warlock 4, but you could just as easily say Sorcerer 4 and it doesn't matter. So in Warlock 4, we're going to get a feat or ASI, but we're going to go with a feat here, and I'm going to grab Telekinetic. This gives us not only a +1 bonus to our Charisma, but it also gives us another involuntary push. It's voluntary for us, it's involuntary for the creature, right? Which is great. Again, more movement within the Spike Growth. So I haven't really talked as much about what the strategy is, and I probably should mention that, right? So when we hit somebody with our attacks, with our Eldritch Blast, because we are a Dow Genie Warlock, we actually are going to be dealing a little bit of bludgeoning damage, which is interesting, right? That's what activates Crusher, right? So we already got our Spike Growth up, which we now can quicken, which is great. So quicken Spike Growth, and then for our action, we can still cast a cantrip. So we can't do that vice versa. We would have to quicken the leveled spell and then cast a cantrip in order for the rules to work. But either way, that's what we can do. And so we can push somebody up to 15 feet because we've got Repelling Blast at 10 feet and Crusher at 5 feet because of the Dow. So we're dealing extra damage plus extra movement, which means extra damage in the Spike Growth, which is fantastic. We're gonna make this a little bit better once we go just a little bit farther. We just need a few more levels, and this is gonna be incredible. Just wait. So next level, of course, again, if you took Sorcerer 4 last time, then take Warlock 4 this time, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter. But I'm going to grab Warcaster here. This is going to help us maintain concentration on our spike growth because I don't want to be dropping that. Our spell slots are a very precious commodity. We don't have many of them, and so we don't want them being wasted, especially since this is kind of our entire shtick. So yeah, it's either this or we wanted to try to fit in Eldritch Mind somewhere. I don't know. I feel like this gives us a little bit better options since we're not going to be a weapon user. This gives us the ability to also hit people with Eldritch Blast from melee if it's an opportunity attack. So I think we get just a little bit more out of that in total. Next, we're going back to Warlock, and we're going to be here for a hot minute. At Warlock 5, we get no features, but we are going to get an invocation and, of course, 3rd level spells. For invocations, there is only one that I want to take, and that is Grasp of Hadar. This basically does the same thing as Repelling Blast, except it pulls. Now, one key difference is that Grasp of Hadar only goes off once per turn, whereas Repelling Blast can happen as many times as possible. So we've got to be very careful with that, right? When we're hitting certain levels and gaining extra beams, we have to be considering where the positioning is of the creature. We want to be able to push, pull, and then push again, right? If we've got 3 beams, and we can even do some other things, which I'll talk about here in just a second. But either way, I think that is an important thing to remember, because at least to me, I forget that one works one way and one works the other. So just be very careful with that. But yeah, Repelling Blast works as much as you want. Grasp of Hadar does not. For 3rd level spells, again, there's not a ton out here that I'm super worried about, but Thunderstep, of course, gives us another option for teleportation. And then, of course, Counterspell, Dispel Magic, the classics are always good to have in the back pocket. So now we get Warlock 6, and this is kind of where things get crazy again, right? One thing I love about this build is that it doesn't really plateau. There's a lot of growth happening all the time. So Elemental Gift gives us 2 things, right? One, of course, we get our resistance to the bludgeoning damage and that kind of thing, but more importantly, we get flight, and that's a big deal, right? We couldn't fly before, we can now, and this creates an interesting dilemma, I guess, right? And this is one to talk to your DM about, because there's some sneaky things that you could possibly do. And technically it's possible, but I know some DMs frown upon it, and so just want to throw that out there. But basically we're gonna have flight now, right? And so the goal is, now that we have all of these beams, we can push people around, but what our goal is now has now evolved. We want people to be stuck in the spike growth and never be able to leave. That's the goal, right? And we can now kind of do that between this level and the next level, and here's how. So when you do this, you can push people around a little bit with your Eldritch Blasts, of course. You can move people around as it were. Then what we want to do is we want to get above the creature to pull the creature upward, right? We pull the creature 10 feet up in the air. This then causes the creature to fall. This does not redo spike growth damage, at least I don't believe it does. However, it does knock the enemy prone, and of course it takes 1d6 damage, but I'm not that worried about that. Here's the problem. That creature is now prone in the middle of a spike growth. So now it's got to try to stand up, which is half its move speed, and it's in difficult terrain. So that's kind of tough. Plus, at Warlock 7, we get another invocation, and we're taking Lance of Lethargy, which is going to reduce your walking speed. Yeah, if it's a creature that has a 30-foot walking speed, you now have 5 feet of movement. So if it doesn't have teleportation or some other method of getting out of the spike growth, it's gonna be in for a really bad time, because this is just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And think about this, we can do this over and over and over and over and over again, right? We can even quicken our Eldritch Blast, which is great. So we can of course move people around, which is cool. And then we can use a second one to do it again, which is pretty cool. So get on one side and push somebody around, possibly get on the other side, push somebody around if you've got enough move speed, or hit somebody, fly up, pull them, do that kind of thing. There's a lot you can do here, right? And of course we can do this twice in a turn with our as long as we have the sorcery points, of course, which we've got an okay number of, but it's going to get a little bit better. We also get 4th level spells at this level, and I'm going to grab Dimension Door just because that is a great teleportation feature. Not bad at all. Warlock 8 gives us another ASI or feat, and like I said, we're a little short on our sorcery points. So I'm going to go ahead and grab Meta Magic Adept. That is going to give us 2 extras, which is fantastic. And then of course we can pick up either Seeking or Subtle, whichever one we did not pick before. And the other one can just be whatever your favorite is, whatever we have not taken so far. I'm going to go back to Sorcerer for another level here because I think that grabbing 3rd level spells is nice, but really we're on our way to something else. We're going to grab, of course, Fireball at this rate because why not? And also Magical Guidance is not that bad. So ultimately the goal is to have more and more sorcery points. I think that's the ultimate goal, but yeah, it's pretty great. Back to Warlock 9, no features, but we do get an invocation here. I'm just going to grab Investment of the Chainmaster. Why not make our familiar just a little bit more powerful? And for 5th level spells, the only one that really makes me care is Synaptic Static. All of the other ones I'm not really that worried about. Warlock 10, we get Sanctuary Vessel, and that's a big deal. I wanted to get this one too, because this allows us to bring friends in and it allows us to rest quickly, and that's a huge deal, right? We talked about how if it's a ring, right, you could use this for infiltration. Your whole party goes into the ring except for your rogue, and then your rogue is sneaking around, right? And the rogue gets busted, boom, the whole party's ready to go, right? And everybody's gotten a short rest because you've been in there for 10 minutes, right? That's a huge deal, especially for your people who get things back on a short rest. Those people are going to love the little cat naps, as it were, inside of the vessel. Back to Sorcerer for one more level, and then we're done, I promise. We get Bastion of Law here. Again, we talked about this a lot in the Clockwork Soul. I think that this is a pretty decent feature. I like this a lot, and I think it works well on this kit, so that's a great pickup there. And again, that's another sorcery point. Then last 4 levels are all Warlock. We grab our first round of Mystic Arcanum at Warlock 11. Mass Suggestion is typically my go-to. Of course, there are a couple other options if you want to go with it, but Mass Suggestion is typically very safe. Warlock 12, another ASI or feat. I would just boost either Constitution or Dexterity, whichever one you want. Warlock 13, I'd get another round of Mystic Arcanum. Ironically, Force Gauge is kind of fun here. I think Force Gauge could be interesting, but there are other options. But I think Force Gauge is fun at this level. And then finally, level 14 in Warlock, level 20 overall, Limited Wish, which is huge. I did not want to give up this, and I think it's a worthy capstone. So I think it works out. So that's our build for today. Let me know what you thought down below. Before we go though, we've got some honorable mentions to go through. And so I've got some interesting options, right? So if I wasn't being the worst and you know, choosing the custom lineages, then I've got some other options that might be cool. The Dragonborn, actually, the new Dragonborn, new-ish, I guess, is probably a pretty decent option with combination of the Dragon Fear feat in order to keep people running away from you through the spike growth. That could be cool. Or, you know, if they have to stand and fight, then you have disadvantage, right? So it puts them in a really bad spot there. So I think that's really cool. The Eladrin is always an amazing option. Gives you teleportation, which is really good in this case, because then, of course, hit somebody with something, teleport around, hit somebody, you know, that kind of thing, depending on your action economy. So I think that's really cool. Then we've also got the Genasi. Makes a lot of sense, at least thematically speaking. Maybe not so much on the power side, but at least thematically speaking, it makes a lot of sense. Next up, for other feat options, either Shadow or Fey Touched makes a lot of sense here. I think those that boost you by +1 and then give you a bunch of spells are both really viable in this case, so definitely consider those. Moderately Armored, to grab that medium armor proficiency. And finally, Spell Sniper, as if we weren't hitting from far away enough, this gives us another option to do that, so definitely an option there. And finally, for other classes, so for Sorcerer, like I said, I see a lot of wild magic sorcerers just because of how Tides of Chaos works, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But to me, I just felt like the Clockwork Soul is just a little bit more consistent, and you don't have to worry about blowing up every time you cast Mage Armor. And so that's just the way that I see that, but that's just me. Also, of course, Fighter, like we said before, I think Fighter makes a lot of sense on this, just to be able to action surge and work your magic just a little bit better there. So that is the video for today. I hope you all are looking forward to next week when we move on to Great Old One, the good old Gulag, and we will see how it does compared to all of the others. Until then, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.